Welcome, everybody. We are LUMAN, an agency of industry leaders who bring a breadth of experience, driving innovation and creating the future. Today, we're live with Tirza Hollenhorst. Welcome, Tirza.
Hi.
And Philip Horvath. I'd like to just take a moment to introduce today's topic, which is about optimism, how we are staying optimistic in these times, why it matters for leaders, and how you can maintain yours. Philip, you want to give us a little introduction? Why optimism?
Sure. Well, it's fun, really. But if you think about being a realist, really means to look at reality and see what's out there and look at everything. And that means you can entertain a pessimist perspective or you can entertain an optimist perspective. They're both valid, right? If you look at the world out there, there's, climate change, there's political and, financial and social systems decay and even breakdown. There's the current and future pandemics that are coming up. There's technology and there's some really childish and actually dangerous use of some of those technologies that we're building. So there's a lot of reason to be concerned. And I think there's a lot of reason, and especially at the moment, after months of hunkering down and doing whatever it takes to keep going, I think a lot of people are kind of wearied now too, and a little bit exhausted, and trying to keep up the optimism in some ways. And I think it's they see a lot of exhaustion of surplus capacity, where people are just simply, or such capacity where they're simply not able to keep going anymore, like you can for a quick important situation, but then get exhausted. And I know I've been feeling this myself. I mean, I've been very productive on the one hand, but also feeling tired and feeling exhausted and having moments of going, what the fuck is going on with this world? Where you're really kind of overwhelmed, and it's easy to get overwhelmed because it's all really big and awful, in so many ways. And the world is at the same time continuing to go, and grass is growing and birds are flying around, and it's beautiful weather in San Francisco apparently, and Berlin was very windy but very beautiful today too. But life goes on, right? And when we look at big things, like mountains or like the ocean, we're reminded that we're just this little short scenario, that's happening for a few years before we depart again, and in the end life keeps going. Right? And really within that, with that distancing, it's also possible to then really choose what you want to look at. Right? Do you want to look at all this pessimism that you get from doom scrolling every day through the news? Or do you want to look at something that's actually also possible, right? And actually begin to dare to imagine a world that we could live in, or then really connect to that vision. I know, Tesla, you're really one of the masters I know around visioning and the importance of vision and why it's important to have a vision of the future. And I think, maybe when I say a few words around vision and why it makes sense to focus on positive ones versus negative ones.
Yeah, and just touching back on that sense of exhaustion that we're all, I think, experiencing. We're of a generation where uniquely a vast majority of us have not experienced World War. We've not experienced like anything but this incredible period of stability. And so while this pandemic feels long and exhausting, it's actually relatively short and even minor in its overall loss of life and productivity still. And so we're really coming from this incredible place of privilege, and from that, this really first experience of shared global adversity is large for us, and wearisome, and it's easy to look at headlines and to have our attention focused on the negative. And in our attention economy, there are a lot of companies really with a fiduciary interest in you having negative emotions, because experiences of outrage and anger actually keep us connected to the devices and keep us engaged on platforms, and actually have us go deeper into platforms. There's this actual incentive for companies to feed us a continuous stream of enraging and emotionally evocative content. Unfortunately the way that a lot of these platforms actually prey on our natural adrenal systems. And the way that we can really take back ownership of where our attention is actually by focusing the attention in one place. We can focus it is in the current moment. And another place we can focus it is on the possible future. And when we go into the possible future, the way that our brain functions is that we don't actually have a difference in how we remember the future and how we remember the past. It's actually the exact same process. It's the same neurochemical process. It's fundamentally the same neurology that has us remember the future and remember the past. And so when we are remembering the future, we're actually creating a memory and experience of that future. So what future would you like to create? What memory do you want to build in? The memories that we've got from childhood, we know are unreliable, and sometimes we're written down in the best possible way and sometimes the worst possible way. But if we have the opportunity to remember the future that we want to live into, we might as well remember a good one. And so when we actually go into vision and we take the time to practice the emotional state we want to live into, the physical surroundings we want to live into, the physical state we want to live into, the physical practices we want to live into, we're actually creating neurology around that. We're creating memory, we're creating actual even physical capacity. There's plenty of research showing that people who actually see themselves practicing shooting baskets or practicing playing the piano have an increase in their capacity to do those things. They don't actually have to physically do them. They can see their physical bodies going through it and build that muscle memory and actual physical capacity. And so the incredible power of visioning is that we're literally laying down the capacity to live into that future. And as well, because we are problem-solving creatures, our mind can't help but go to how is this going to happen? Now, if you get stuck in the how, you can actually talk yourself right out of that future. But if you let yourself get curious and optimistic about the how of like, oh, there's a problem to solve. I wonder how I can solve it. What happens is our great problem-solving brains begin to enlist all of the things that we have of people we could connect, books we could read, places we can go to for information to actually solve and create the plan around that how. So I'm, as you all know, just an incredible fan of the power of vision to actually pave a path toward a new possible future. And I'll turn that back to you, Philip.
I just want to intercept here because I love all of this. Especially this idea that we don't have to choose optimism from a place of should or because we have to. It's really because we are responsible for the life that we're leading, and we have the opportunity to create the future, to create the life we want to live. And so choosing optimism is coming from a place of choice and because I want to, because I'm blessed to, not from a place of should, which is going to increase our chances of creating the future we actually want. So Philip, I'm curious if you could speak more to this idea of creation. Why is it important? How do we create when we're stuck in a very dark, damp, our head is full of this, negative media. Like how can we possibly choose optimism in a world of such negativity?
Well, that's the best time to do it, right? Because this negativity, for the most part, is probably not very enjoyable. And I love how Tirza started, talking about how we're beginning to create even by imagining, right? By even imagining a particular different future, by imagining that we're creating new pathways, we're creating new associations, we're creating new identity for ourselves, right? And this is really where it starts, because if I'm going to build anything, the first thing I have to do is imagine it, right? If I want to build a table, if I want to build a chair, whatever I might want to build, the very first thing I have to do is imagine it. And once I imagine the table, I'm going to imagine, is it going to be round? Is it going to be square? Is it going to be triangular? Like how many lengths is it going to have, right? How many people do I want to be able to sit on it? Right? Especially if you then begin to associate with, oh, I'm going to sit around this table with my friends or my family and my loved ones, and you actually feel the joy of having that table complete already. Right? As Tirza said, you're beginning to form those neurological pathways, and you're beginning to create. And then you can go and sketch it, right? And then you can figure out, okay, cool, if I want to build it this way, what materials do I need? Right? And then you can go get a pick list and build the thing. Right? But you have to actually imagine it before you build it. And if you imagine the world is going to go to shit, what are you going to build? I mean, seriously, probably then really the one question is, do you want to, have a great time before then? And then depending on your, spiritual inclinations, either it's all over when you die anyway, and then who cares, right? Whether you're going to get a couple of more sensory pleasures in before you kick it, or, if it's, you might go somewhere else afterwards. Depending on how you behave now, it might not be a good place where you're going to go afterwards. So kind of if you want to hedge your bets in some ways, then really the most meaningful thing you can do is create a legacy, right? And really think about what are you creating here while you're here, right? Because everything that is alive seems to continue to evolve and wants to bear fruit, right? Wants to create some impact. So why not you? Like what you said is, in Indian thought, there's this idea of dharma, and it's often translated with responsibility, right? But dharma just means the natural order of things, right? It's actually not about your duty or should or any of those things, that you highlighted, but it's really about that's how things happen. Fish, swim in the sea and birds fly in the sky, and you do what you're here to do, right? And if you're doing that, you feel joyous, right? And you feel like you're actually benefiting someone. And somehow life does show up to support you around doing that, right? And so it's a very pragmatic choice in some ways to say, of course, optimism, right? And really, especially when you feel stuck, especially when you feel like, everything is heavy around you. The one thing you can do that's really easy, that's super empowering, is create something. And even if it's write down all your horrible thoughts, right? Write down all your fears and anxieties, write it all down, call it poetry, as a friend of mine likes to say, right? I mean, get it out, right? But even that is a creative act, right? Even then you're taking ownership of life again, and you're not just a victim of circumstance. And I think really this is a lot of the core of what we talk about.
I absolutely love that, Philip. That's a great actionable task that you can do to shift even just a tiny bit. You may not get all the way to, full joy, full optimistic, livelihood, but if you can, start with creation just by getting all of your dark thoughts out on paper, then you shift on the spectrum just even a tiny bit towards a little bit more freedom, a little bit more, relaxation, and a bit more joy and optimism.
And the other way to think about.
Sorry, but you just already said too, like sometimes you might want to sit and feel bad for a moment. It's okay too. So it's not about happy. So sorry, Tirza, please.
Yeah, and then another place you can go with that is to just remember the last time you have created, and that you have created something, and you have changed something for yourself in the past. Maybe you changed something for someone else in the past. Were you ever able to create joy for somebody else? Because in these times, I know that for some of us, it can get quite dark and quite stuck, and feel really hard to even imagine moving forward. And so sometimes in those times, the best place to think about creating is for somebody else. Is there someone else that whose life you could make just a little bit better today? Be that a family member, someone whose circumstances are more challenging than yours even. There's a way that we actually forget that when we give, we feel better than when we receive, actually. And in that giving, it is a very powerful thing to be taking care or giving care to somebody else. And that care is a creation. But as we move from past that, like even momentary care, then we can move into, what else can I do? What else can I create? How else can I feel good today? And unfortunately, and this is something worth looking at, some of us have actually become quite addicted to not feeling good. We become that way. We become addicted both from our the devices and the media streams that keep us addicted, but even from our own patternings. from the belief that I have to work hard to make something happen. This idea that anything good comes from suffering. I must suffer in order to achieve. I must suffer in order to feel good, actually has us in a pattern of suffering that becomes like we're literally addicted to. And so in order to actually shift out of that and to create, there is a useful looking at what do I get out of feeling bad? What do I get out of having a pessimistic view? Because a pessimistic view also can alleviate any sense of responsibility toward creating a different future. It can be a way of abdicating any sense of responsibility for the world you're actually living in, for the creation that you have around you.
It's a really, really good point. And I think at the moment we see a lot of this. I mean, I think there's a lot of underlying anger in society as well. I mean, from anger to have your freedoms curtailed with, having to wear a mask or not being able to do the things that give you joy, like going to a sports event or going to a concert or being out in the park with lots of people and not feeling bad about it. So I think there's also a lot of that, and holding that back, right, also creates additional anger and additional, identification, and not being able to get that out or not being able to be creative, can also be, in a way, and bring up shadow sides of this, right, and really bring up a destructive side and a destructive creation, which is, some of the lashing out we see online and some of the anger that, it's surprising even from people where you wouldn't expect it. Sometimes the venomous comments that are made, some of that is explainable through that as well. And I think that's really, and you kind of hinted a little bit already, I think that creation starts with really creating yourself, right? And really making sure that you're okay, right? Some level of self-care. So I love when you said that, when in doubt, focus out, that if you have issues with yourself, you can find someone that you can help, and that act of giving makes you feel better. So that can be a form of self-care, actually, to take care of someone else. And it's interesting that oftentimes the people who have the least to lose, the most to lose, or have the least, are actually more generous than people who have a lot to lose, which is quite curious. I remember observing a bunch of homeless people in Santa Monica at some point, and they were all helping each other, and they were all sharing with what they had, the little that they had, right? But it was also a way of having their humanity, right? Of feeling that they're part of something, that they're belonging, that they're connected, when most of their experiences that people look away when they see them. Right. And so I think that sharing with each other is super important. And it can also start with really just taking care of yourself, right? And creating yourself, whether it's physically or emotionally or through, active acts of making sure that you're okay.
Yeah, we talk about this a lot, Philip, the importance of regulation and self-regulation, and checking in with how am I doing at all of these different levels? Because if I'm failing to stay hydrated, it's really hard to be optimistic if I'm not hydrated, if I'm not moving and breathing. And there's a lot of really lovely content right now on the importance of breath that's going around, and the importance of sleep. And so while all of these basic fundamentals seem obvious, and kind of like the thing, the first grader 101 version of taking care of yourself, it's actually those fundamentals that we can really come back to in this time of, did I eat well, drink enough water, breathe well, move, and take a moment to still my mind today? And if we come back to just those very simple fundamentals, they allow us to feel a bit better, a bit more grounded, and also a simple sense of agency over who we are and what we're creating. And that simple sense of agency of, I can create a slightly better feeling self. I can create a better feeling world right in this moment. Itself becomes compounding interest in you and snowballs on itself. I'll turn that back to you.
That's beautiful. Thank you for saying that. And I was reminded of there's a Zen saying that if you think you don't have time to meditate for 10 minutes, you should probably meditate for an hour. And I was a little reminded of that because, especially in the current times, it's easy to say, hey, I simply have no time, right? Because instead of, the little bit of commute time that you might have spent, now you have 15 more Zoom meetings every day, and which is somehow magically expected to do some work in between, which is, super ridiculous. So we've, not understood that when we chunk things virtually, we need to make them smaller. We need to have a different breakdown. We need to actually have deep work time, right? We need to have time away from the devices, away from each other to really process, and even more so than when we are in physical presence with each other. And so I think this is where right now a lot of people would say, yeah, you talk about these self-care things, that's great. You're freelancers or something, you maybe have 2 hours in the morning to do all your yoga and things like that. And I say, this is also one thing I've done for you, Tirza, as well, is to say, it's not as important how long do you do it or how perfect you do it, it's important that you do it. Right? Like the other day, I know normally I have a thing right now where I'd like to go running twice a week. And the other day I got as far as putting my shoes on, but I put my shoes on and I was at the door and I nearly went out, but at least I created the association in my brain that, hey, it's Tuesday, put your running shoes on and go running, even though I didn't do it, right? But then this morning, the second day of the week where I'm supposed to run, I already was close to not doing it, but then I saw my shoes there and I'm like, come on, man, come on, put them on, man. And I put my shoes on and I went running. It was awesome. It didn't take long. It was even like, a 20-minute run, really brief. But for 20 minutes, I was with myself. I did something for myself. I breathed consciously. I was in my body consciously. And it set the tone for the rest of the day. And I know that if I hadn't done it, I would have been like, all day. Whereas it's actually coming back from that and going, you did it. You did it. And having that moment of just joy, of just, knowing that I've done something, like you said, like that basic agency of, if I can create and fix all these gazillion things in the world, I know I can create some action that will make me feel better. And I think really, if you don't do anything, and if any of what you've just heard is all irrelevant to you, please make sure you take care of yourself and do something every day, at least once or twice, where you feel like you took care of yourself.
Yeah, and I love you bring it back to the small thing. I had a really incredible exercise habit before the pandemic, but I had ACL surgery and then went straight into lockdown and really have struggled to recreate a fitness habit. And it was really the foundation of my whole sense of well-being. And I have come back to the place really where I began when I began creating my my fitness program, which is just this very short workout, and just like do the short 20-minute workout. And if you get that, it builds on itself. And there's a way that any kind of self-care, you begin to crave it. We crave the dopamine hit of completion, and we also crave the experience of clarity, or the endorphins of working out, or the experience of eating well. All of those things become like a self-continuous cycle. But it's the hardest part is to get it going. And so for anything you're trying to implement, 5 minutes of meditation is infinitely more minutes than no minutes. 7 minutes of working out is a lot more than no minutes. 1 glass of water is a start. And so let's not let that idea of I need to be perfect get in the way of I can do one little thing.
Yeah, I love that. And it ties back to something you were saying earlier, Tirza, this action step you were leaving us with, which is envision this time in your life when you were feeling really good, really optimistic, and you were putting a lot of creative energy and excitement out into the world. What is it that you were doing in your life? And I want to pose this question to our viewers. What is it that you were doing in your life that was leading you towards that joy and that optimism? And can you bring that back? Can you have that back? And what's the minimum viable amount of time that will keep you in the game, right? What is the minute? Is it 5 minutes of running? Is it, like you said, Philip, is it putting your shoes on even if you don't go for a run, right? Look, I did it. Is it drinking a glass of water every morning before you go to work? Is it, calling a friend late in the evening? So let's keep that self-care going.
Be kind to yourself, you know. It's just one place you can start if you want to be optimistic.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you. That's almost time. Do you, either of you, want to just recap us and give us any last closing words to our viewers to inspire them to find that optimism? Philip?
I'll take it, Philip.
I was just gonna say, I kind of think I said it, like, be kind, you know, be kind to yourself, be kind in this whole process, and know it's a process, and it's not about reaching anywhere. It's about how you're doing it in every moment. And in that moment, you know, choose optimism.
And from that optimistic place, really take a few minutes to envision a future you want to live into. And then take just the first tiny step of caring for yourself today. And let us know what you're creating.
Thank you. Thank you, Tirza. Thank you, Philip, for giving us all of your wisdom on this topic of optimism and creation in a time of pandemic and distraction and pessimism. And I want to thank our viewers for joining us today. We would like to know what you're creating. So let us know by leaving us a comment or sending us an email at connect@luman.io. That's LUMAN, connect@luman.io. And if you got value out of today's topic, let us know. Like our Facebook page, leave us a comment down below. Thanks, everyone.